Okay, so we had a good drive over here. We're now at the beautiful Beltline, and it's just a gorgeous day out here. So Adam, I want to ask you, we talked a little bit about self-driving cars and that technology, but I want to ask you, what are your thoughts on artificial intelligence?
Artificial intelligence, I think, is a very real, very interesting, and already very valuable field for industry and for individuals.
Right.
So I think that's an area that we're going to see significant investment in, significant growth, and significant discoveries because of those first two things. But it's also an area where the traditional laws of innovation around the progress that we anticipate making may not apply, because if we achieve what we set out to achieve with machine learning and we get that foundation to become actually intelligent, then it's going to be able to evolve itself. It's going to be able to modify itself to be more optimal in ways that we as humans probably would never imagine. And an example of that is Google's Translate service. It used to be very human assisted, and it used to translate every language to English before translating it to a different language. So if you want to translate from, say, English to German, and then I wanted to translate from German to Korean, it would actually translate back to English from German and then English to Korean. That's how it used to work.
Right.
They started applying ML to it versus that kind of model. And ultimately what they discovered is that the algorithms created their own intralingua that no human at Google's been able to understand, but it's about 50% better at more accurately translating between languages directly than the human-assisted model was previously, and they have no idea why.
If you follow that path, though, I mean, the concerns are, will machine learning eventually and technology and robots to take away jobs? Will eventually the machines themselves, even in that example where we don't really even understand how they're communicating, how far will that go, and what are the ramifications of that? I mean, do eventually the machines start to kind of do things that we don't want them to do? Even a mild example is also, for example, what we were talking about coding earlier. There's some people that believe that eventually machines will write their own code and then build their own software, and so you won't even need software engineers. What are your thoughts on that? How far away do you think we are from that kind of scenario, if ever?
So I think a scenario like that, if it ever came to be, would come up so fast and onset so quickly, it won't matter. We'll go from it not happening and us not believing it's coming anytime soon to well past it happening and having the implications almost instantaneously, because the systems, if they ever reach that point, the knowledge and the intellect of these things ever get to that point, they aren't limited by sleep, and they're not limited by the capacity of any one human thinking about it. They have access to unlimited resources basically at that point to evolve faster than we ever could.
Right.
And so I'm one of those believers that if it ever got there, it won't matter.
So do you think that we ever get to the Westworld or Terminator scenario where the machines become self-aware?
I hope not, but I'm not going to fool myself and say it's not possible.
Right. How about singularity? Do you think that's where eventually? I've read that some people believe that if there were aliens, they're probably machines because they've evolved so much further than we have, and we eventually will become machines. And so if the aliens that existed, they would probably already have passed that threshold, and they're all just machines. Do you think that's something that might happen?
We're, as humans, and almost any other intelligent species, but let's just talk about humans, we're only limited by our biological limitations. Imagine being able to take the state of consciousness out of your brain and put it into a system that could operate it effectively and proficiently, but didn't have all the biological limitations of our bodies. Ultimately, why wouldn't we want our species to evolve to that? We've been evolving our biological forms to last longer, to deal with more. Well, really, all we've been doing is iterating on old technology. Why wouldn't we want to reimagine the whole thing and take the state of consciousness out of that constrained system and move it into a system that doesn't have those constraints and see what happens next?
Yeah.
I mean, ultimately, I support the cause on that.
So you'd be all for that?
I'm a big believer and a big proponent of the concept of brain data backup and brain data reinsertion, and I don't believe that we have to limit ourselves to the idea that reinsertion has to take place back in a biological form. There's a lot of interesting research going on in that space. There's a project in Switzerland called Project Blue that is a fascinating attempt to simulate an entire human brain, and they're currently on a trajectory based off of the milestones they've set for themselves, albeit to be at that state for a simple human brain by 2023, I think.
Recently, with Facebook and their algorithms and their machine learning, or maybe it's not machine learning they're using, I'm not sure, but the latest report is that the Russians use their algorithms, basically their advertising platform, to market fake news to Americans to sway the election. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, you think that's something that, that's kind of a little bit of a taste of maybe how the machine can go a little bit awry when the people aren't kind of managing it and taking care of it, aware. Because currently, I mean, Mark Zuckerberg himself was like, in the beginning, after the election, we had, he was baffled that anybody would accuse Facebook of meddling in the election, and I don't think they did on purpose. But clearly, in the most recent days, he's kind of admitted that yes, we had a role in this, and we're trying to figure out how to fix it. So, I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Generally speaking, the single biggest risk of the success of all of this technology that powers the modern world is the impact and implications of the scale of all of our dependencies on all of this. So it used to be if somebody wanted to produce propaganda and distribute it, they would have to physically print it and physically get it in front of you and then somehow do that in a way that you believed. Now, a single person can create the same propaganda but get it in front of tens of millions or hundreds of millions of people with a click. And so the scale of the implication is now vast, and the impact of that implication is now more instantaneous. Where it used to be, once again, oh, you got this pamphlet, we dropped it over by flying a plane and we're reading it. Well, some of your friends got it and some of them didn't, and then you had a debate and you realized it really fell from the sky. It was obvious it was propaganda. Yeah, we don't live in that world anymore. Right. And one person with a few lines of code can have impact on millions or hundreds of millions and potentially nowadays billions of people anywhere in the world. We've never lived in a time like that. We don't have social constructs that understand that. We've never had law that's had to deal with that. We're in the middle of it. We are absolutely in the sausage-making process right now for it. And I think that we would be naive not to fully appreciate that that is happening, and that not is it only happening from Russia towards the United States, but it's happening from every large organization that has an agenda towards every other organization that's not supporting their agenda. Right. Whether that's in commercial interest, whether that's philanthropic interest, trying to get more donors to donate to their purposes versus others, whether that's governments trying to change the course of a democratic election. It's all leveraging the same techniques and the same technology.
My problem with it is, with a service like Facebook or Google, you can kind of make that decision. Although it's getting almost impossible to say I'm basically not going to use the internet because I don't want to give up my data. But
you're choosing to opt out of society.
But that's a market, and there's an established agreement there, almost contract. But what really gets sticky is when the government starts taking our data. If we learn anything from Edward Snowden, it was that basically the NSA was basically taking all of our phone calls, voicemails, messages, text messages, emails, anything, basically all activity that was being done was being tracked and stored away, which really is, to me, and we weren't told about it. We weren't aware that this was happening until the revelations from Edward Snowden. And I think, to me, that's kind of a violation of our freedom, right? That's
completely agree.
Now we're giving up something that really is valuable, and it's in violation of what it means to be an American. And it's been reined back a little bit, but I think it's still kind of happening. What are your thoughts? I mean, how do we deal? I think the biggest problem that I have with it is that the average American isn't aware that it's happening, and or doesn't care, and that is what's really scary.
I think until we find a way to get folks to care, it doesn't matter what's actually happening. And I think that's just a general societal construct. If people don't care, then it doesn't matter. And right now, they don't care. So it doesn't matter to enough people to make change at the scale that's required to make the change. So until it matters to most people, it's not going to actually change. I don't see it happening.
Yeah. Right.
I think that as long as there's a business based on ads, and as long as there's a business based off intelligence, those that can monetize that are going to, and they're not going to support change. So long as that leads to, on average, a better experience than what you had previously, and I'm not asking you to pay me right now for it, the vast majority of the connected population is going to just support the better experience and give up the long-term value of themselves because they don't really appreciate what they're really giving up. And by the time they do, unfortunately, history says that it's going to be too late for them.
There have been so many series of hacks and data breaches over the last, 5 years.
The size and scope of these data sets is so incredible that a single patch on a single server not getting updated in a few months affected the vast majority of living adult Americans.